Hello, so welcome back to part 2 of this episode, Capacity Crunch Connection Reform, where
with a capital C.
With a capital C, where we've been going through the kind of fundamental changes that the ESO is looking to bring in to reform our connection queuing process and pretty much, all the fundamental connection regulation. So we just kind of touched on some of the very high level basics of this kind of gate it or batch process, where you've got the kind of indicative gate 1 batch, opens once a year, indicative offer, and then when you're ready to connect, you put your hand up, get into gate 2, and then get a firm offer back. Yep. So probably the most burning question on everybody's mind is, well, what do I need to meet gate 2? At the minute, this is all very draft indicative at the minute, because the gate 2 criteria, National Grid or the ESO recognise that is probably the most contentious area here. And how you design this could have so many unintended consequences in terms of, you might indirectly be discriminating, which discrimination might be a good thing. Again, they've looked at that. So the current proposal is having land rights and being ready to submit planning. So there's a little bit of ambiguity around, well, what does being ready to submit planning mean as well? So it's there's different things around, kind of agreeing to submit planning within a defined timescale, and that could be measured off milestones that work back from a connection date, or milestones that work forward.
Because at least that would be in the customer's control, right? Compared to like the planning process itself.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And as well, I think they've maybe looked at, well, do you go further and have like planning permission? But then that's seen as too big of a blocker to investment, particularly when you look at offshore wind projects and nuclear projects and everything else, the amount of investment needed to get those through planning and not having a grid connection. So that's the kind of high level, but that will be consulted on at length over the next number of months. And then you also have to think about, well, what does reasonable timescales look like, and obviously preparing a planning application for an offshore project's very, very different to like a battery storage project that's a few kind of shipping containers.
You kind of need you need to take a view, and then you need to put like a backstop date near the end, don't you? Like in terms of like a...
Yeah, so I think that is it, but then it's kind of like, well, how do you calculate that date, and should it be the same for all technology types, or should it be different, and everything else. So that's the kind of current kind of thinking on it, basically, but that there's going to be a lot of industry engagement and consultation.
But we do think that should help. Those elements will help clear out.
Well, so the latest I've kind of read was, again, I don't think they've done a full analysis on the current queue but I think at a ballpark they reckon half, between 200 gigawatts to kind of half the queue sort of thing might qualify for gate 2. So let's even assume the lower of that is 200 gigawatts. That's still leaving, a really big queue. Like 200 gigawatts is still a really big queue. So there's a question in my mind as to, like, does this go far enough?
What will they like limit batches? Like in a gate 2 scenario, like let's say everything just happened to qualify. It'd be very hard to design a network for it. Like, will there be a...
No. So I think they looked at all our options around, should you have different limits for different technology types? I think, so one of the actual things, before I get into that, one of the things with this is it is designed that it can be modified in the future. So the idea is, the ESO talk about, look, there's a lot to do here in a short time. So it's kind of like minimum viable product, MVP. Yeah. So it's kind of like, right, well, let's get all the regs changed to set up this framework.
Yeah.
We don't have a lot of time here. We probably need to keep things relatively simple. Nothing simple, but as simple as we can to make it happen on time. And then at a future date, the gate 2 criteria could be changed and modified.
It could be maybe more tweaked in terms of how we've progressed in the decarbonisation journey, in terms of meeting 2050 targets. All that kind of stuff can come later.
So exactly. So I think they, again, from my reading of some of the reports, that they have looked at, because National Grid have future energy scenario modelling to sort of say, how many gigawatts of batteries and solar and everything they want. So you could kind of put a bit of a technology spin on it to look at technology types. I think the big issue at the minute is we don't have the strategic kind of energy plan. I can't remember. There's an acronym for this as well, where basically how much of different technologies do we need in different areas of the country. There has been a lot of talk of creating a strategic energy planning framework. Is that?
I'm not sure myself.
But looking at the technology
and where's best sourced for it and all that good stuff.
So they've kind of said, well, look, we could in the future modify Gate 2 criteria to more.
But we've got so much to get through first.
Yeah,
you're at the starting phase, so that's a refined form as you get through.
Exactly, that's my reading on their approach to it. But yeah, like just while we're on that, I did say we would compare it to the Irish system. So that would be like a key difference. So people that are familiar with how it works in the Republic of Ireland, they have an annual kind of batch process or ECP. Another acronym for you is what it's called in the Republic of Ireland. That's been a process been in place for quite a long time. So the current ECP process, I think, came in 2019, but there was like a batch process similar-ish looking before that as well. So yeah, a couple of key differences. It's run annually. The national grid or the ESO process Gate 1's annual, but Gate 2 is quarterly, which is good. So it does look, they are proposing to do this a lot more regular, whereas in the Republic of Ireland you have to wait a lot longer for the annual entrance. And then as well, the Irish system is a lot more kind of nuanced then in terms of the equivalent to that Gate 2 criteria. So in the Irish system, they kind of mark you on a range of criteria that is all roughly based around readiness to connect. So it's not, the current Gate 2 proposal here is relatively speaking, it's two relatively simple metrics.
Yeah, it's more like hurdles that you have to jump.
Yeah, land and plan and readiness. And the plan and readiness I get is not a simple metric. That there's a whole question in that. But there's a lot of other stuff they look at in ROI. That they look at technology types. And you're kind of scored on a matrix and then prioritized as part of your score and outcome. A bit like running like a procurement exercise or something.
Yep.
That you might have been involved in. And then the other thing is in the GB model, in terms of how offers get issued. Again, that's sort of done quarterly with relatively tight time frames. I think, I could be wrong, I think they're intending to give you an offer within about 6 months of the Gate 2 closure in the Republic of Ireland. How quickly you get an offer is also kind of determined on a priority matrix.
Type. Yeah.
So again, it's things like, well, if you're in a pretty simple area of the network where we know there's capacity, you're going to get an offer pretty quickly. If you're in a complex area of the network that needs new cluster substations and things, well, you're going to be kind of more towards the end of the year before you get your offer. But yeah, that's some of the key differences in the Irish system. Just for anybody that's interested, it's useful to compare against what other provinces do.
I think it'll be interesting as well in terms of where the government go with this, and obviously, election has soon to be called or will be called, and it'll be an interesting one to see how far that goes in terms of drawing up like the economic investment for housing, factories, etc., along with this, connection reform and queuing. And is there any prioritization? And how do those two sort of government policies all line up?
Yeah, so on a personal level, I do think that's something that does need a discussion. Is actually, sorry, I should say, I'm still not 100% sure in how some of the lower level demand connections will fit in here. So a lot of the wording in the cost modification proposals and the ESO paperwork refers a lot to power stations and generating stations, because obviously the queue is primarily made up of renewables and batteries.
Yep.
So there is a little bit of uncertainty in my mind at the minute, and it might just be I haven't got fully read into it. I might need to follow up with somebody around both large scale demand connections and small scale demand connections. If it feels like the large scale ones will get caught up in the process, it feels like the smaller ones hopefully just indirectly feel benefit from this, that they don't get caught up in it, but the capacity will get released for them as a result of it.
Yep.
That is my kind of current view on it, but that's by no means certain. And a lot of this is we're going to have to keep a tight eye on it over the next few months.
Well, there's going to be numerous consultations and discussions.
There's so many strings and threads in this this is only the start of the thread. There's so many of these. As I said before, we've had the initial COSC mods in from National Grid. They recognise that there's going to need to be DCUSA mods in terms of the distribution stuff. There's going to be so many modifications and different things to sort out. Which brings us nicely, we haven't actually spoke about it yet, is the vast majority of our customers sit in that distribution connected camp. Well, what happens then? So the DFTC, the acronym that I have explained, the distribution forecasted transmission capacity, at the minute that looks like a fairly, again, a boilerplate type statement. There's a lot of detail on how that's going to work to sort out. So, at a very high level, the expectation is the distribution network operators will submit forecast, capacity needs at all their GS acronyms again, grid supply point substations where they take capacity from the transmission network. But like, how's that going to be done? How regular is it going to be done?
And how does all that queuing work? And
how firm is that booking up capacity? What does the DNO need to really book that capacity in? Yep. Some DNOs might be ultra conservative.
What's the gate 2 equivalent?
Yeah, they might be ultra conservative, not forecast enough.
Yep.
Some might say, well, hold on,
I'll take it.
I'm fed up of all our customers complaining to us that I can't get them connected because there's no transmission. So I'm going to ask for loads of capacity and just over egg it.
How does going to have to be a criteria there too, isn't it?
That's a process in itself.
Yep.
So I can see some, a lot of maybe ENA led consultation and there'll have to be DCUSA mods around that to codify it or put it into regulation as well. So that's a huge thing. Obviously, that whole DNO TSO interface has been a massive bugbear for the industry in terms of queue jumping and distribution customers being disadvantaged. That's a bugbear. So at least something's been done to try and fix it. But there's a lot of detail to work through there in terms of how that works, and that to make sure as well that distribution customers don't remain disadvantaged.
People are treated fairly, for sure.
Yeah, exactly. So we've touched on quite a few bits there. So get it batch process, the fact it's going to be applied to the whole queue, the fact of how distribution connections will participate through this new DFTC mechanism, although we know how exactly that's going to work. There's also a point of large power stations that connect at distribution level who would have a bilateral agreement with National Grid. They're going to have to play the two systems. So whatever regulation change there might come at distribution level off the back of this, they're going to have to sort that out, but also navigate. It looks like navigating the gate 1, gate 2 process in parallel at transmission.
Sounds simple.
Yeah, I don't look forward to getting involved with any of those connections. And we've spoke about the gate 2 criteria in terms of how it is the crux of all of this and finding out more. In terms of any other discussion points, we've kind of done the comparison with the ROI, the Irish system, and there is a lot of parallels, as I say, that we were involved in back in the Northern Irish system as well when all of this, the transmission capacity came to a head. Which just for anybody that doesn't know, one of the big things we did at that time was we resorted the whole queue by basically anybody with planning permission went to the top of the queue based on their planning date, and then anybody without got sorted below as a second kind of batch in the queue. And that was a really blunt way of sorting out shovel-ready projects. Yeah. But again, massively supported by the industry at the time, loads of consultations, relatively simple. And that was a transmission and distribution queue combined, all merged into one, and everybody treat it fairly and the same, based on the same rule set, all consulted upon and fully agreed. So there is some
documents are still available if you want to reference them.
Yeah, so there is some mirrors and all of that stuff that we obviously spent a lot of time on. And the so another big thing just to highlight is, it's a bit unclear if the DNOs will change a lot of their regulations or what will happen. I'm sure there's going to be.
I think there'll have to be something.
There's definitely going to have to be some throughput there. So again, it doesn't really matter if you're connecting 1 megawatt EV charging right up to 1,000 megawatts of battery systems or data centers. This is all something to keep an eye on. This is huge. So Well, one of the last things to touch on is a bit of a look forward. So, what do the next few months, the next year look like?
Yep.
Like, when is this all going to kick in, or what do you need to be aware of? Which is the big question. So, the current timeline laid out by ESO is basically saying we've kind of had this deadline in January 2025 set out by government, the public statements by government. They are basically looking to have the rules in place by January, which involves sorting the whole current queue into qualifying the whole current queue for gate 2 or not by the end of the year. Now
Sounds like a spreadsheet.
yeah, but to do that you need to establish what gate 2 is, and as we've established in the discussion,
Yep.
there's a lot of work to go in to work out gate 2 and the rest of the process and get CUSC mods and regulation mods and working groups and consultations and everything aligned and agreed on this.
Yep.
So that all needs to happen to work out what the gate 2 criteria is, to then sort the queue accordingly. And that means obtaining evidence from everybody as well. So, the queue's already massive. It sits at transmission and across all the different distribution network operators. So to go through all of those, get all the evidence lined up, there's going to be a very tight timescale to do that by the time you actually establish the rules. And then the idea is that they will start modelling basically get the gate 2 queue into shape.
Take it through as it backs in.
Then do their connection design and modelling for that gate 2 queue with apologies if I get this wrong, but I'm pretty sure, yes, the gate 2 design and modelling would happen from Q1 to Q3 2025, and then everybody getting their gate 2 offers out around Q4 2025. Asterisks, I'm not sure what will happen. The distribution, that's obviously very well geared up for transmission applicants.
And from a customer perspective, like that's 18 months away, more or less. But from a regulatory perspective, that'll be a huge amount of work to do between now and then to get in a place to be able to do that.
Yeah, so particularly for some of the customers I can think of that are maybe electrifying some bus depots or EV charging at relatively low capacity that are currently sitting with these 2030 kind of dates. That's a the end of next year before things start to kind of wash through feels like a long way away. But then as we well know, to enact that amount of regulatory change, consultation, the amount of work involved, it still feels like an absolutely like mammoth task in such a short time frame.
But all being well for those customers, although they've got those long time scales now, in 18 months' time, we would hope to see that come the right direction now.
Well, and I should say, like, some of those customers are referring to, we have been able to work some of the more tactical solutions with DNOs and everything to shorten those timescales as well. But there are still a lot of other customers out there sitting with those longer dates.
So, like, in summary, loads to do between now, January 25, and the end of next year.
Yeah, and then beyond that, like even you look at once this gets into BAU, there's that quarterly gate 2, like that's going to be a load of work in itself. You're going to be, or the ESO is going to be sitting with like 3 or 4 of those gate processes operating in parallel. When they're issuing offers for the last gate 2, they'll be processing the next. There's going to be a lot working in parallel there, which I'm pretty sure is why in ROI they do the single annual one. So that's not happening.
No, because it'd be very difficult for a planner not to get back to say, well, that's that same job that I was doing.
And that whole piece around, like, the DNOs probably need to wait to see how some of this transmission reg change plays out before they can start to really work out, maybe at an ENA level, what's going to happen there. And then, like even the DNOs, the amount of customers they have is obviously a lot more than grid as well. So huge amount to do. I think, stepping it back from the task at hand a bit, the positive is something is happening. I feel like it's a step in the right direction at a high level. There are questions, is the gate 2 criteria going far enough, and hard enough? I do think there probably needs to be a conversation. It's probably more of a political one to be had in terms of, should we, should the likes of housing and
that prioritization piece,
electrified factories and stuff that really drives the not that renewable energy doesn't drive the UK economy, but all our stuff that is maybe kind of real issues.
Where those cross policies come to face,
should they be held up because of some of the stuff that's going on? I'm not saying what's right or wrong, really. I'm just saying I think it's worth a discussion.
It sounds like there's plenty more for future broadcasts, for sure.
Yeah, so I think that's probably what we'll leave people on, is we'll be keeping as close an eye to this as possible, and we will make a commitment to be a bit more probably regular podcasters as we keep an eye on this going forward. So it's probably one we'll come back to, I don't know, maybe August time or in a couple of months. There's a few milestones in the programme in terms of how all this progresses, so we'll just keep an eye, look out for some of the big announcements and maybe a podcast off the back of that.
Yeah.
So I hope you've enjoyed listening. I appreciate that was probably a pretty long one, so we did take a break in the middle, and a lot of detail to get your head around, albeit probably left people with more questions as well. There's a lot of detail yet to be sorted, as we've discussed. But yeah, I suppose in summary, massive change coming at us over the next year, as if there hasn't.
Biggest reforms probably in a generation.
Probably, yeah, it's probably a valid statement. Yeah. Okay, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the podcast, and we will see you next time.
All the best.